Good morning, welcome back. I'm Sean, and this is Mountains Garage YouTube channel. I'm going to wrap up everything that happened this week. Call it another Friday wrap up. Small things that happen that don't by themselves add up to enough content to make a video, but you put them together, hopefully it's semi-interesting. So there was a 9-inch Ford here with a leaking ARB air locker. Gear oil was coming out the air hose. It's an old unit where the O-rings are inboard of the bearing, so I had to get creative to get the bearing off. He had some trouble, the owner of the rear end, coming up with the correct O-rings. It also needed a yoke and a front seal and a new nut. And he's probably got it back in the Bronco and is headed off to try it out off-road. So that job was done. A buddy of mine picked up a fuel tank I welded for him, my good buddy Charlie. And in the process of having an interesting conversation, which always happens, he mentioned he wanted me to build him a TH400. They'd already ordered the converter for a truck that him and a buddy are working on. The only core I had ready to go was that 68 Chevelle SS396 transmission that I picked up a few weeks ago. I wish I had a bunch of regular 6-bolt cores, which would make an excellent transmission, but I'd love to be saving. I waited so long to find a bunch of these 8-bolt cases, but hey, it's all I got, and that's what I'm using. So they wanted the trans brake. The Trick is coming up with one in a couple days. I had ordered one for myself, the ATD. That should be here any day now. But I found a Cohen. Now, my entire life, talking to myself, I've called this cone. It's not smelled like cone, but I thought it was cone. I think must have heard somebody say it that way. But if you call them, they answer the phone Cohen. So I bought a nice traditional reverse pattern brake. This is an old company. They make a lot of good made in America parts. A lot of your standards, which you kind of take for granted, TCI, Cohen, ATI, and to a point transmission specialties, although I think some of this stuff either gets copied or is coming from offshore, but they still make some pretty good stuff. I put one of these in the late 80s, but it's been a while, so I went right on the website, downloaded the instructions ahead of time. I ordered the brake on Tuesday. He wasn't even out of the driveway. My buddy headed back to New Hampshire, and I had already ordered the brake. It was going to be here Wednesday, which is pretty optimistic, one day from Ohio. And then it was 2 days. And now FedEx updated me this morning that it'll definitely be here Friday. This is actually Thursday that I'm talking. So, but hey, I got the instructions. I know how to build the transmission. It's a very minimally invasive install. No case modifications. Basically, you do the normal stuff with the direct drum. They give you a spring for the rear servo. That's about it. Drill the bleed hole. I mean, all the normal direct drum stuff, the bleed hole, the heavy springs, leave the center seal off. And anything you do beyond that is up to you. I will leave the second seal back on the center support off like I normally do. This will block off the case for the dual feed mod, I'm sure. So that's going to go together and be gone by the weekend with any luck. For me, when I get to this point in the job where everything's clean, I've sorted out my parts, now it's fun. The assembly process is fun. It's so much work to get to this point. But, hey, I'm set to have a good day because I'm going to assemble what I can without the trans brake valve body. And speaking of valve bodies, bear with me, we'll get there. This Winters Sidewinder shifter was for sale a couple towns over last week, and I went and bought it. Got a wicked good deal on it. It does not have the neutral start and reverse light switches in it, but they're readily available. It was on a Turbo 400 in an LS Mustang. And it was also missing the cable brackets and whatnot, which is all available. This is actually even brand new, a really reasonable shifter. And by the time I buy everything for it, I probably could have bought a new one. But in the process of going on the Winters website, I came across their own version of the reverse pattern Turbo 400 valve body, and it has a manual valve that looks exactly like that and a gold plate. So I'm continuing to look for any part numbers on it, but I think I found potentially where it came from, and they do list gaskets for it. So obviously I'm not putting this back in the 68 TH400 that I'm putting the brake in, but I still want to get it cleaned up, bagged up, get new gaskets for it so it's ready to go next time I want a reverse pattern manual valve body. I promised I would show some of the de-rusting process of the Pontiac heavy-duty Turbo 400s that I stripped that were rusty inside. Now these parts have mostly been cleaned and are waiting to go in the bath. These parts I just took out. I just wipe off. I read the instructions on the Evaporust, which is what I'm using. I bought a 5-gallon bucket. It was less than $70 shipped. It claims to be relatively safe. They put the sticker over the label of the actual brand, but it's Evaporust. The first few batches of pots, I was using my metal tray, which was rusted, and I put it in and it completely cleaned it, which is a waste of the Evaporust, in my opinion, because when I put this back in the pots washer, it starts to rust again like it is. I don't want to continue to contaminate the Evaporust, so the last time I just dropped all the pots in the bucket and then spent 5 or 10 minutes fishing them out with a pair of pliers and a awl, trying to get them dragged out of there. But I got them out. If I just wipe them off with a rag just like this, and they claim it'll keep it from rusting more. The pump itself came out really nice. I still need to get the pressure regulator out and stuff, but I was lucky on some of the stuff that none of the surface of the gears actually got any rust. It was just like the outside areas and non-critical stuff. So I still go over every part, and probably about half of them are usable and half aren't. And it is nice to have buckets of extra parts laying around, but I'm suspect of every one, and I'm cautious to use them anywhere. And I can only build so many transmissions for myself, so they're only semi-useful. But I probably wouldn't sell them to a customer. But for a long time, I've been operating with hardly any spare parts, so it is nice to know that I can probably reach for something if I need it. So I'm going to continue to soak. I let it soak. This stuff here was probably in there 3 days. They say 24 hours will do it, but I actually forgot about it. And then I'd remember, but didn't have time to dig it out because I knew it was going to be a pain because I didn't use the Dunk strainer. But I'm going to load her up again, put the lid back on. It doesn't have a bad smell. You don't have smell-o-vision, but it's not horrible. It's not a good smell. It's not a bad smell. It's just a smell. The 71 Nova. Last week, I had swapped out the driver's side brake hose. I was going to swap both sides, trying to cure the leak at the caliper hose connection on both sides. More of a drip. I mean, it takes a month before it forms a drop and falls on the ground, but it's still a leak. I wiped it off, cleaned it off several times, and over the several months it's been sitting here, the leak persisted to the point where it would hit the floor. So I hit the driver's side swap the other day. New hose, new copper washers. I didn't have time to bleed it or anything because I had other things to do. I came back out the next morning, and where the blue rag was a pile of fluid, leaking worse than it was before. So I finally condemned the calipers. They're under warranty. I have another pair that I need to swap out along with the passenger side brake hose and let it sit some more. It's a really bizarre situation to have a continuing leak. I don't often have leaks on brake lines. I try to do a really good job. This one's driving me nuts. Last tidbit of information I thought was interesting. This is a 4L80E tail housing, an output shaft. I had both these on the lathe this morning, cutting the O-ring groove off. You can see the 400 shaft is longer. It had to accommodate a governor gear drive and then the speedometer gear. And they placed it further up in the transmission because of that, I assume. And it ended up with a shorter tail housing. So short tail, longer shaft. Shorter shaft with a long tail. Interesting. You can see how far down in the back of the case everything sits compared to a 4L80 where it's way up here. Well, that's your Friday wrap-up, and in reality it's still Thursday afternoon. I had an idea for another video, and this one has enough content on it right now to bore you to tears. So like, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'm going to get right after filming the next video.